Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, oftentimes on this channel, we kind of try to define where the lines are so that you can all decide where you want to scribble. However, occasionally, but not as often as perhaps we should, we do remind you of what happens if we color outside the lines. That is, what happens if we violate the law. Well, lately I've been getting a lot of questions, and it has a lot to do with a rather unpopular piece of legislation, and that, of course, is RCW 9.41.370, better known as Washington's Standard Capacity Magazine ban. You see, a lot of you have been asking about what happens if I just basically say to hell with it and decide I'm going to willfully violate this law. What kind of punishment am I actually looking at? So, today we're going to spend a few minutes and talk about what happens if you knowingly violate Washington's magazine ban. Okay, listen, before we get going down the road we are going down, proud to announce that this video is being brought to you by Security Gun Club. That's right, Washington's nicest indoor shooting facility is found right there in Woodinville, Washington. Security Gun Club is absolutely the nicest indoor facility you'll find anywhere in this state. Now, there's only a couple things that are actually better than the facility itself. Number one, Tom and John, the owners over there, have put together absolutely the best staff. They are the nicest people you'll find anywhere in the business. So stop by, tell them I sent you, say hi. But the thing I'm most proud about my relationship with Security Gun Club, you see, it's the dedication to education that they have there. Because Jackson, the head of training over there, has put together absolutely a top to bottom excellent curriculum here that will cater to anybody of any needs of any skill set. So whether you're brand new to firearms or you've been around firearms your whole life, whether you just need some general education or very specific individual instructions, Security Gun Club has what you're looking for. Listen, you practice all the time to stay out of the morgue. What do you do to practice that you don't go to prison? Sign up for their basic self-defense law class taught once a month by yours truly, and learn what it takes to keep you out of prison. So for more information, visit my good friends over at Security Gun Club at securitygunclub.com. That is security with an E. That is not a misprint. securitygunclub.com. Okay, so what we are talking about is the hypothetical of what happens if you, the lawful and responsible gun owner, decides to willingly become a unlawful yet still highly responsible gun owner, because that's how I would view an intentional violation of Washington's magazine ban, RCW 9.41.370, which we will go over in a minute here. Do I view that as unlawful gun ownership? Yeah, it is in violation of the law if we're in violation of 941.370. Do I view it as irresponsible gun ownership? Candidly, I don't. I don't in this situation because I realize that many of the magazines that are banned, and literally all the magazines that are banned by the statute, are actually standard capacity magazines, ones which were probably purchased with those particular firearms. Now, as a caveat, a couple of disclaimers here. Okay, number one, I am not encouraging any of you to go out and willfully violate the law. Let me say that again. I am not encouraging any one of you to go out and willfully violate the law. I want all of you to be clear about that. I want the Washington State Bar Association to be clear about that. But as I have always stated, our role here at Washington Gun Law is to give you straight, objective information. You get to decide what that means to you. We try to define where the lines are so that you can understand where you need to color if you want to stay inside of them, and you understand what the consequences are if you choose to color outside of them. It is up for you to decide what your level of compliance would be, so long as you understand and assume the risks associated therewith. With that in mind, let me also point out that under Rule of Professional Conduct 2.1, I do get to counsel potential clients in the following fashion. In representing a client, a lawyer shall exercise independent professional judgment and render candid advice. In rendering advice, a lawyer may refer not only to the law, but to other considerations such as moral, economic, social, and political factors that may be relevant to the client's situation. Now, none of you are my client. That's another one of my disclaimers, but it is under these hypothetical guidelines that I am going to operate today and talk about what do we do if we willfully violate Washington's magazine ban. Now, what does it mean to willfully violate the law? Well, the statute, RCW 9.41.370, makes it unlawful in the following cases. No person in this state may manufacture, import, distribute, sell, or offer for sale any large capacity magazine except as authorized in this section. And then, of course, under RCW 9.41.010, we define a large capacity magazine as any magazine which holds more than 10 rounds. So it is unlawful in the state if we were to sell large capacity magazines. So if a FFL knowingly went out and sold large capacity magazines, that would be a violation of 941.370. Now, we talk about knowing violations, and if you take a look at the statute here, it's not a knowing violation. It's in many ways a strict liability violation. If you violate this law, you are guilty. What I'm talking about is some of you who made the comments about, what if I just throw 2 middle fingers to this law and go and do it my way, okay? And literally willfully violate the law. Now, does that make any difference in the eyes of how guilty you are? No, it does not. Could it potentially affect a sentence? Well, depending on the judge, it could be an accidental violation, an unwillful violation versus somebody who is basically thumbing their nose at the system, could be interpreted by some judges differently, okay? So we know it's unlawful to sell or manufacture. So if we are in willfully selling, if we are willfully manufacturing high capacity magazines, it is also unlawful to import. Now, this is one where I could see a lot of us perhaps doing either intentionally, which I am not recommending, or unintentionally. But let's say, I don't know, let's say you go to Pullman, Washington frequently. And of course, there's another fine town just past Pullman, Washington. It's Moscow, Idaho. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to Moscow, Idaho. I've had the pleasure of being there many times. And there's this fantastic hardware store there called Tri-State. And I mean, Tri-State's got everything. It's like a Walmart on steroids. It's got everything. And over there, they have an amazing firearms section. And the people that work there are fantastic. And lo and behold, they have all sorts of magazines that you can find there, or what I like to call freedom on a shelf. And so if a person were to buy a bunch of magazines at Tri-State in Moscow, Idaho, and then return to Pullman, Washington, we are now engaged in the act of unlawful importation of high-capacity magazines. Okay, now remember, if we're bringing them into the state because I live in Idaho, I'm going to go shoot in Washington, and I take them back out of the state, that's not the act of importation. Likewise, if I previously owned a bunch of magazines in the state, I go out of state and bring them back in. As long as I'm bringing back in the same number and not more than I left with, I'm not engaged in the act of importation. But what I'm describing is I went to Idaho, I bought a bunch of magazines, and now I'm bringing them back into Washington State. That, too, would be and in that situation, if I knowingly did that, that is a willful violation, but does it make it any different in the eyes of how 941.370 is written? No, it does not. And then, of course, it also makes it unlawful to distribute, sell, or offer for sale. So if I ran to Idaho, bought 200 30-round PMags, and then brought them back to the state of Washington and started advertising them on my gunbroker account for Washington residents, or I had my own website called WashingtonHighCapacityMag.com or whatever, I would be engaged in multiple acts which are in violation of 941.370. And as a matter of fact, if I went and brought all the magazines back and then just gave them away as a charitable donation, hey, compliments of Washington gun law, I would be engaged in the unlawful act of distributing high-capacity magazines. Now, the only way not to violate this law and still involve high-capacity magazines is to be in possession or using high-capacity magazines which you owned prior to the enactment of this law, which was July 1st of 2022. So with that in mind, all the ways that we could go out and either intentionally or unintentionally violate this law, how much trouble are you looking at? Well, in RCW 9.41.370 subsection 3, the statute specifically tells us a person who violates this section is guilty of a gross misdemeanor punishable under Chapter 9A.20 of the RCW. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you could be punished by up to 364 days in jail and up to a $5,000 fine. Now, in reality, what is the likely penalty? Well, I think that depends a lot on what jurisdiction you might be in. I believe that there are some jurisdictions in the state of Washington where, candidly, I'm not sure a prosecutor would want to pursue charges, and even if they did, I'm not too certain how much the justice system would want to come down on a person. Even a conviction could probably result in 0 jail time and a nominal fine. However, you now have a criminal record. Now, I could think of other jurisdictions in this state where perhaps they are far more anti-Second Amendment and want to make more activist statements from the bench, and where a person could, in fact, actually face nominal jail time. Do I see a person getting a year in jail for an offense like this? No, I don't. Do I see a person getting a month in jail for something like this? No, I don't. Not even in the most liberal of counties, the most anti-gun counties. That's just not how it works at the misdemeanor level if you don't have a bunch of criminal history. Now, if you have an individual who this is their 14th, 15th, and 16th conviction for this, yeah, at some point you can only thumb your nose at the court so much before any judge, no matter how reasonable they are, will bring the hammer down upon you, and for good reason. But also remember this, that when we take a look at any other firearm statute and things that are illegal in firearms, when we're unlawfully possessing firearms or things like that, we face a separate count for each unlawful firearm we possess. So in fact, if a convicted felon was found with 4 firearms in their car, they're not being charged with 1 count of unlawful possession of a firearm, they're being charged with 4 counts, and it's far more serious. Well, the same presumably would go for magazines. So, using the same example, I go to Moscow, Idaho, I pick up 25 30-round PMags, bring them back to the state of Idaho because I'm going to give them out to my friends. At that point, I could theoretically be charged with 25 counts. Does that mean I'm actually looking at 25 years in jail? Well, hyper-technically, yes, a judge could theoretically max you on each one of those offenses and run them consecutive. What's the likelihood of that occurring? Well, it's somewhere between slim and none. So that's the consequences that you face if you were to go out and willfully violate RCW 9.41.370. Now, I want to make this clear. I am not condoning, I am not advocating for the willful violation of this law. But we are giving you as objective information as we can so that you can determine what that means to you. We preach here all the time about lawful and responsible gun ownership, and to remain consistent with that message, my advice is to comply with the law at all times. Listen, if you have any more questions about this or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights, remember, you can always contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now, let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.